welcome back to my Halloween month reviews. I hope you guys have been enjoying these reviews so far because I've been having a fun time making them, especially adding more stuff to my background for this year. Hope you guys enjoy the scarecrow that I got some help with, as well as having a skeleton bat on one of my posters. And for this video, we're going to be looking at an animated film, in particular a stop motion animated film. And there could have been some that I could have talked about, like films like Corpse Bride or Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, or films like The Nightmare Before Christmas. But instead, for this video, we're going to be looking at one film that is one of my favorite stop-motion animated films, and that film is Coraline, directed by Henry Seleck, and is the first stop-motion animated film to be made by Laika. In this film, a new family moves into this big house called the Pink Palace, where they have to share with some neighbors that live around it, and then the daughter of this family named Coraline, voiced by Dakota Fanning, finds a small door that leads her to the other world, where it's sort of like her world but different, where she meets different versions of her parents that look like her parents but instead have buttons for eyes, and she thinks this other world is fun at first, but soon realizes that the other world may not be as fun as she thinks. This movie came out in the year 2009, and it surprised a lot of people when it came out, and it launched Laika to make more animated films that they would later do, with movies like Paranorman, Box Trolls, Kubo and the Two Strings, and The Missing Link. And I remember this movie coming out when the trailers would pop up in the commercials. That did get me intrigued, and I looked at more of the trailers for it, and it looked creepy, but for some odd reason, I was still interested. And I knew it was creepy, and as a kid, I wasn't used to the creepy stuff back then, but a younger me just couldn't help but feel interested in a movie like Coraline. And I was getting a little close to my teen years. I was a couple of years away from getting to my teen years. I was like 11 when this came out, and I watched more of the behind the scenes stuff that they released and some more of the trailers, and couldn't help but think of like the animation, the creepy imagery, the music, I just couldn't help but think about it. And of course, later learned that it was based off the book by Neil Gaiman, which is a really good, by the way. I do recommend reading the book if you haven't yet. And I did eventually see this film in theaters, and when I was watching it in the theater, I was mesmerized by what kind of stuff they did for the film. And then later getting the DVD for the film, and I kept watching it over and over again, and I just couldn't stop watching it. And it's one of the first films for me growing up that I watched multiple times where I knew it was creepy, but I kind of liked it. And to this day, I still consider it to be one of my favorite animated films of all time, especially when you look at stop motion animated films. It's up there with The Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, and Wallace and Gromit for me, as well as Kubo and the Two Strings, which is a very underrated Laika film in my opinion. And of course, this film is directed by Henry Selick, who also did The Nightmare Before Christmas, as well as other animated films like James and the Giant Peach and Wendell and Wild. And out of all four of those animated films that he did, I think Coraline might be my favorite of his, because it's more dark and creepy than The Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's certainly more dark and creepy than Laika's other films, and it's one of those animated films that feels more adult and not so much family friendly. It has some moments that are very terrifying and can give kids some nightmares if they decide to watch this film, because this is one of the only animated films that feels like it was aimed more for older audience members. And despite the fact that this film is PG, it still feels like that it should have been PG-13, but it got away with a PG rating despite how mature and dark it is. And that's the kind of thing you wouldn't see in today's animated films, because they would really just make animated films PG and not have a whole lot of dark moments. But here, this movie is PG and it has has a lot of dark moments that it got away with, like with some of the designs for the characters throughout the film, or with some of the ghosts that you would see, or one scene involving a play that I am still shocked that they kept in the film. And if you've seen the film, then you know what I'm talking about. I also gotta talk about the animation. The stop motion animation for this film is still phenomenal, even to this day, with the character designs, the backgrounds, the other world, and the plants in the other world. The way they move and glow, it all still looks stunning to this day. And it also does something interesting with the color palette as well. Like when you focus on the real world, it's all very gray and dull and not a lot of stuff is going on, while the other world is very colorful and vibrant, and it later looks creepy and gross as the film progresses. And all of that is done while they were making the film at 24 frames per second, where they would have to make one frame for a character to move around and to change their expressions for the next shot, which I can imagine that would take a lot of hard time and effort to make each shot throughout the film and make sure that the character models are moving for the shots. And I really think they paid off when they did the animation for this film, because it still looks stunning to this day. The music by Bruno Cueles, I'm sorry if I got that name wrong, does a really good job with the score for the film. It definitely mixes well with the tone, and it's definitely one of those things that helps elevate the creep factor, like with the main theme of the film that you would hear in the credits, as well as this one certain part called Cocoa Beetles. Every time I hear that part in the film, that gives me chills every time. The soundtrack is easily one of the best parts of the film, and it's one of those things that make this film worth watching besides the animation. And this film has some very down-to-earth characters with real problems, like Coraline's parents are very busy with work, they don't have a lot of time to make their garden, and they don't have a lot of time for Coraline as well. They can't afford to buy good food, they unfortunately have to eat with what they already have, and it's mostly because they moved into this big house. And Coraline hates the fact that she moved into this new house instead of just staying in her old neighborhood, which causes her to have problems with her parents throughout the film. Which, with that part of the film, I can kind of relate, because when I was a kid, I used to hate moving. Like, I used to hate it. But as I got older, I got used to it. It happens sometimes. And she talks to her new neighbors that get her name by mistake and call her Caroline a lot, and she has to correct them by saying that it's Coraline. And her life in this new house isn't the greatest thing for her, but when she finds the other world, that becomes the best thing that's ever happened to her, where she sees toys coming to life, delicious food, and jumping mice at a circus. All of that seems great at first, but once the film progresses and you learn more about the other world, you get the feeling that something is very wrong, because throughout the film we get little hints of what's gonna happen in the other world from other characters, and we get to learn why the other mother, voiced by Teri Hatcher, wants Coraline to stay with her. And the best way to explain that is that I am unfortunately gonna have to get into spoilers, so if you have not seen Coraline, that is your warning. And if you don't want any spoilers, then skip to here. But if you don't mind spoilers and you've seen the movie already, then you are good. So halfway into the film, we find out that the other mother, or as she's later called, the Beldam, wants to sew buttons into Coraline's eyes and eat her, which she's already killed some kids that have entered the other world already. And we get a great reveal where she slowly changes into her true form, where she's taller for a while, and in the very ending where we see her as a giant spider with needles for fingers and legs. In fact, her whole living room turns into a giant spider in the very end while she's trying to catch Coraline, making her one of the most terrifying villains in an animated film, and Teri Hatcher gives a fantastic performance as the character. In fact, the rest of the acting is really good, like Dakota Fanning as Coraline and Keith David as the talking cat that would later talk to Coraline more about what's going going on in the other world, but Teri Hatcher as the other mother is a standout in the film. She is haunting as the character, and I would say that this is her best performance. As you can tell, Coraline is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love it every time I watch it, and it never gets old for me. It is a great movie with incredible animation, good voice acting, a great creep factor, and a really good score. If you haven't seen Coraline and skipped the spoiler I just mentioned earlier, I do recommend watching it if you haven't yet. It is a great stop motion animated film. I'm gonna give Coraline an A, and that's gonna be one of the first kids movies I am gonna review for this month, because I do have another one planned later this month, so look forward to that. Except this one is gonna be a live action with some stop motion. And if you have already seen Coraline, what did you think about it? Do you think it's a great animated film, or do you think that this movie wasn't as faithful as the book and you thought the book was better? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video and the Halloween month review so far, then please leave a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, because it helps my channel grow. Hit the notification bell so you know what other videos I'm posting. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.